All right, welcome back for our second video on biogeochemical cycles. We're picking right up where we left off with nitrogen cycle. One thing to know about nitrogen, this is often a limiting factor in a lot of plants and animals' growth. And the frustrating thing about it is nitrogen is everywhere, right? It makes up 70-some%, close to 78% of the atmosphere in N2. And this is going to be our largest sink or reservoir. That atmospheric nitrogen is not biologically available. We can't use it. And the reason is N2 is up here in a Lewis dot structure. We've got a triple bond holding them together. So this covalent triple bond is a very strong, sturdy bond. It's not an easy bond to break. And so it's kind of frustrating to plants and animals because it's everywhere and we can't get to it. So what has to happen is it has to undergo nitrogen fixation. And nitrogen fixation is all about separating these two nitrogens, right? We want to break them in half and have a lone nitrogen, something that we can use. And so there are two ways this can happen. Something as awesome as lightning has the strength and the energy to break that. And so when lightning strikes, typically you're going to have these nitrogens broken apart because it's in the air that the lightning's passing through, and it'll form a usable form of nitrogen. The other way is through bacteria, and this little drawing here is supposed to be bacteria. Bacteria, there are two types that do nitrogen fixation. This plant is a legume plant, which is a pretty large family of plants. These legumes have formed a symbiotic relationship with nitrogen-fixing bacteria, where they actually have nodules on their roots that house these bacteria that will do the nitrogen fixing right there for the plant. And so it works out really well. The plant gets the nitrogen it needs, the bacteria gets the space to live. There are also some free-floating nitrogen fixing bacteria that just live in the soil. They don't necessarily associate themselves with one type of plant's roots. But both of these will undergo nitrogen fixation, and by doing so, they're breaking apart that N2 and they're forming NH3, which is ammonia. NH3, when it reacts with water, forms ammonium, which is what we've got here, NH4. NH4 is biologically available, so some plants are able to use this. It's not in the preferred form for plants yet, so they're not gonna really jump at the chance to use it. They'll use it if they get the chance. It has to go one more step, and so we have a different set of bacteria, and that bacteria undergoes nitrification. And so what it's doing is it's replacing the hydrogens with some oxygens, and you get nitrite, which is ITE ending, meaning fewer oxygens, and you get nitrate, which is the ATE ending, which means it has more oxygens. Both of these are good for plants to use. The nitrate is much better. So nitrate is the one plants really like. Once we get a lot of nitrate around, then it can be assimilated, and so the plants will take it up through their roots. That's the way the plants get it. The animals only can get this through eating the plants. Without the plants, we wouldn't have any nitrogen for us to use. Of course, it's used in proteins. Once it's in the animals and plants, when they die or give off waste, right, we pee or poop, or the plants die, that is containing ammonia, and it enters the soil again as ammonia, and it can go through this little miniature cycle here over and over and over again. Because nitrogen is such a highly desired thing, it often will cycle through this a bunch of times. Eventually, it's going to get denitrified, which again, we're going to have some sort of bacteria on the other end here that is denitrifying it. This happens in low O2 conditions where you don't have a lot of oxygen, usually in swamps or deep underwater where there's not a lot of oxygen present for our nitrifying bacteria. When that happens, this bacteria will denitrify it. It'll use the energy in the bonds of nitrate to power itself, and it'll form N2, give off NO2, N2 gas. So there's the nitrogen cycle. Human impact, really big impact is fossil fuels. So there is nitrogen in fossil fuels. It's in the soil, it's in the rocks, and it's in the air. So when we're burning things at high temperature, we're going to be burning some of that N2, and we're going to form nitrogen oxides, which are actually a form of air pollutant, not something that plants can use. And we've also, as humans, gotten really good at making nitrogen-based synthetic fertilizers. These are really unnatural to the environment, and they can have a really strong effect. I told you that nitrogen is really high demand, really highly wanted by plants, and that's true all over the world. And so we're introducing astronomical levels of biologically available nitrogen into terrestrial ecosystems and marine ecosystems, and oftentimes it has some unintended consequences. This would be like a fertilizer bag you could buy at Lowe's or Home Depot. The first number here is telling you the percent in weight of the bag that is nitrate containing compounds. And so if this is a 10-pound bag and we've got 30% of that weight, we would have 30% of those 10 pounds or 3 pounds of nitrate in this bag itself. So synthetic fertilizer has a very big impact, especially damaging to aquatic ecosystems because nitrate is soluble in water. And when you're applying this, you're typically going to be watering your lawn too, and it will dissolve a lot of it and just kind of run right off and enter the water cycle. Phosphorus cycle, important thing to remember for phosphorus cycle is there is no interaction with phosphorus in the air. It does not enter the atmosphere. All right, so do not need to worry about the atmosphere here. In this case, our largest storage spot for phosphorus is the rocks. These are our big reservoirs here, and they're stored there for millions and millions of years. There aren't a lot of things that eat rocks, so in order to get phosphate from the rocks, we have to wait for weathering to happen, and that's where wind, water, or mechanical weathering breaks those rocks apart and releases these phosphates. Once we have the phosphates released, it can be incorporated into animals, and then by eating them, incorporated into plants. Again, animals have no way to get phosphate without eating plants. So if you're not eating plants, you're eating something that has eaten plants. Phosphorus is also in a huge demand, all right, just like nitrogen. Once we have biologically active phosphate that has weathered out of these rocks, it's going to go through this cycle a whole bunch of times where the plants take it up, the animals eat it, the plants and animals die, the bacteria releases it, the plants take it up immediately. So this could last for hundreds of thousands of years if you're tracking a single phosphate molecule before eventually it falls into some deep, deep hole in the ocean where there's no decomposers to get to it, or it gets buried deep underground again where there's no decomposers to get to it, and then it sediments out and becomes another sedimentary rock, and we won't see it again for another million years. And that's all I have for the phosphorus and the nitrogen cycle. So hopefully they were helpful to you. Please bring some notes and materials ready to discuss tomorrow to class, and bring any questions you may have. Thank you for watching.